to the Business Legends Podcast, where we interview business leaders and entrepreneurs so that you can learn from their success, become inspired, and meet the people that make change happen. I'm the host of the show, Reese Arlen, and I'm with Mr. Ghostman himself, Christian, who is not here. He does have something very important to take care of that I won't say it's more important than Business Legends, but it is a very important thing. So we're going to let him off the hook today. Today, we are joined by Mr. Chris Mathew with 424 Ventures. Chris, thank you so much for joining me this morning.
Absolutely. Appreciate the invite and looking forward to it. So thank you, Reese.
Absolutely. So let's dig right into it. So tell our listeners what 424 Ventures is and how you got into business.
Sure. 424 Ventures is in its 10th year, and it is a small business management advisory company that really looks to owners, helping owners under 10 million in revenue not fail. And so it's an overview of their systems, processes, technology, and ensuring that there's 100% efficiency from start to finish to gain profitability. But the key is, where are the points of failure? How do you anticipate those points of failure? And then what are your redundancies to ensure that you are good with the head count in uncertain economic environments? So
spectacular. In 10 years, so I'm sure you've seen all sorts of ups and downs, lefts and rights, and slantways and sideways in that amount of time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I have.
How is that? So 10 years would be 2014 or 2013? 13.
Yeah.
So, has there been any, outside of COVID, because that's cheating, has there been any particular major business shift in the last decade for you?
Yes, there has. I think the primary shift is in the emphasis on content for business owners. Tying back to how do they now integrate the expense of content into their overall business plan. Mm-hmm. So traditionally, small businesses don't factor in their marketing just the amount of dollars or investments required, and so for them, every dollar is being watched, and so sometimes convincing business owners that content is a relevant fundamental pillar for their marketing campaigns or just marketing is oftentimes not received when you have business owners, particularly those that I think have been in business for a very long time and give you the stink eye when you talk about that.
You don't want to teach an old dog new tricks type of a thing.
Yes, and so that has been a challenge, but overall, I come into an environment where business owners know their own business but don't necessarily want the help. Mm-hmm. And there is a stubbornness, I feel, that is involved, and rightfully so.
Sure.
Nobody wants to be told about their own business. However, you can be a great baker and have a business baking. That doesn't necessarily translate into you being a good business owner. And that, I think, is a rule of thumb. So, it's been challenging trying to convince people, too, that, yes, you need the help. Consultants come and go, and so I have the word advisory in our services because really that's what you need. You need somebody looking out around the corner for you for the next 5-10 years as a small business owner.
Sure.
And if you have financial advisors, you should have business advisors as well.
Yeah.
Coaches, mentees, however you want to phrase or categorize them.
Yeah, absolutely. We were talking before the show, and back to your point, you could make the best cookies in the world, but it doesn't necessarily mean you have a profitable business. So you got into 424 Ventures 2013. Let's go a little bit before that for your entrepreneurial journey. So I know you worked in NASCAR. So tell us a little bit about your experience in NASCAR and how that transferred over into 424 Ventures.
Sure. And so had a phenomenal opportunity in 2005 to join NASCAR. They had just signed Sprint in 2004 as their title sponsor, and they're putting together a team to help manage the contract.
And you were not in North Carolina at the time?
I was in New York.
New York, that's right.
I was in New York at that time.
Huge life improvement, but anyways.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah.
So I had the opportunity to come down, join a team. At that point, it was a NASCAR Images, which is around the content of NASCAR, the sound, sight, sound, and images of NASCAR. And then the role was being a liaison managing Sprint for that entity and NASCAR. And so facilitating all their content, marketing, et cetera, So it was a phenomenal experience. Did that hopefully well enough for over eight years. Got to learn about the sport of NASCAR. Got to learn the role of content. You have brand, content, and technology, and the interface of the intertwining of all those three, and then how both NASCAR wanted to receive that content and how Sprint wanted to push that content. So there, I really came to understand through the 43 teams that participate and the level of national races, so Cup, Xfinity now, and trucks. But there was disparity between those at the top of the bracket and those at the bottom of the bracket.
Sure.
And that lay in, obviously, sponsorship, the technology, and the quality of the driver, right? So that's where I started just kind of a little side project for myself, is trying to understand how do you get the bottom half of the bracket competing to move up the table? What would help them? What would, like where are the pain points for them? And
did NASCAR and Sprint, was that what they wanted to push as well, or they just wanted viewership?
No, so NASCAR and Sprint, again, one, phenomenal having the telecom come in,
right,
and commit to a 10-year relationship, and to push their products. So I think for them the focus was separate. This was my focus within the role I had.
Yep.
But the focus for them was serve as a liaison, ensure that the needs of the contract is met, and then deliver on the promise and ensure exceptional experience. And then at the same time, leverage both Sprint's technology to look at NASCAR content and drive that towards their consumer base. So that was their focal point. Mine, again, this is a side view, if you will,
right.
In terms of, how do we help, how to use that content for the lower half of the teams. And so that kind of led me down the road. And in 2008, we had the recession,
right,
which is a major impact in, obviously, around
every
the country, but for the sport itself. And that really hit the lower half of the table. But outside of the sport, I was asking myself, because I dealt with a lot of small businesses that were either in and around the truck races, looking at brands that were getting involved, but the impact they had by this recession, and essentially like almost 200,000 small businesses shut their doors.
Wow.
So that right there struck a chord with me as to how do we help these businesses not fail, including the bottom half of that bracket on the table. And so that's where the seed was planted around 424, and I just had the privilege of being at NASCAR visibility in these areas of technology, content, and brand to understand the synergies that's required in order for them to all excel at 100%. So that was where the seed was planted.
And then 5 years later, here comes 424.
Yeah.
Was there any? I always say, like, the straw that broke the camel's back. Was there any particular moment where you were like, I want to go out, I want to do my own thing. I don't want to work for anybody else. I want to kind of enable my dreams of what I want to do and save small businesses, basically.
Yeah, great question. I don't know that I ever thought I would want to go into business for myself. I knew I wanted to be involved in sports, and so I had that privilege, both starting in New York with a small brand agency called SME Design at that time, that was then acquired by Learfield most recently. But in that small agency, where I had an opportunity just to put a blueprint on operations and processes, and that just got me, probably planted the seed. I didn't think I had the ability, because at that time, it's capital, it's where's the money going to come from, et cetera. So I really didn't think I was going to branch out on my own. However, after NASCAR, I did spend a year at Madison Square Garden, and while I loved it there, it was not. It was a disruption to the lifestyle I was used to here in North Carolina.
Yeah, a little bit faster paced, I imagine.
Absolutely, yeah. And so, at the same time, I had 3 kids, and one was in high school, middle school, and elementary.
Mm-hmm.
There would be a disruption for them. So I made the decision to come back to North Carolina, and nobody was really hiring at that time, and so
Right.
kind of put me in the corner and said, okay, let's just go out there and put a shingle up and see what we can do. And so that's where that foundation was laid, both at NASCAR, working with small businesses, looking at, the environment post-recession, and how can I help, because this country has provided me the phenomenal opportunity to excel and in a number of areas, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate both the privilege and the right to be able to come alongside others and to ensure that they don't fail.
Right.
Because a lot of people did that with me.
Yeah.
They came alongside me to ensure, hey, look, we're gonna bring you up, and then I want to just pay it back and pay forward.
Yeah, it sounds like what maybe started as a passion project for you, because it starts all the way back in NASCAR, which how do we move the needle on the lower half of the field type of thing, ends up becoming this great business venture for your own. So man, it's spectacular that it all works out that way. It's so funny. I look back. I'm just listening to you speak, and you worked for an advertising agency, and then your position in NASCAR, which is very I don't want to say it was super content focused, but I mean it was certainly an element of the job. And then both of these things now transfer into the way you consult, and actually the thing that you first said when we got on the show, which is convincing business owners that content is masterfully important these days.
Absolutely.
So just out of curiosity, why do you think it is that it's difficult to convince business owners that they need to get content?
Because the initial business strategy, the traditional business strategy that everybody comes out of, is in this lane of business and brand, and it never iterated past that.
Right.
And so people are focused on where's the ROI, and trying to convince both the finance and operations. Okay, we need this element to increase sales, and where does it in the structure of the revenue workflow, if you will. And people just, I don't know how else to say it, but when technology opened the gates in terms of, and I'll say the iPhone, and having a camera on your phone to absolutely video and anything, and then you have vehicles like YouTube to be able to put up that content, and all of a sudden the masses now are like, wow, this is now consumption. And so companies were forced then to iterate this strategy, going from business to brand to content. And the relevant, the role that content plays within the business strategy, for me at least, is how do I motivate people towards purchase intent with my content,
right?
And then how do I stay connected with them,
right,
with content? So that third layer is where business owners need to come down and understand, because if it rolls up back into the brand strategy, the brand is, why is my brand relevant, and then how do I increase loyalty within that brand? So whereas the content then has this cross matrix where your content can increase your loyalty, and it can improve your relevance, which then ties back to generating revenue and staying ahead of the competition. So that layer at that third level of content, that's the convincing part where I think people are now, obviously, they have no choice.
Right.
They're either going to adopt and adapt, or left behind, or die.
Yeah, we end up having this conversation a lot. We work, well, I told you before the show, we work a lot with Carolina's ABC, Association of Builders and Contractors. Sorry, I don't know why it took me so long to get out, but we end up talking to a lot of general contractors and subcontractors and things like that, and a lot of times their digital presence is lacking, would be would be a very easy way of saying that. And they'll pose the question of what's the importance of having a website. And things are good in the construction world right now. Most general contractors have more work than they can deal with. They have trouble finding labor. But when that inevitable cycle occurs, the argument becomes, who are you going to go with? The people that have a digital presence that you can find and look up and things like that, or the people that have a website from 1990?
Yeah.
It's a pretty easy conversation from that point because it's pretty commonsensical, if you will.
And it's now part of the evaluation,
right?
If you have an introduction to somebody, what do? You go straight to their website, LinkedIn profile, and you kind of look at what their narrative is, and that's now the natural order versus, hey, do you know someone that knows someone who has worked with this guy,
right?
Or that person.
Yeah, that comes second nowadays. If you hire somebody, the very first thing that any employer does is look at the LinkedIn profile and see who they're connected with, and if there's any connections there, might reach out to those. We just hired a new guy, and when we hired him, we looked at his LinkedIn profile, and I noticed a mutual connection in common that I'm good friends with, and I said, hey, how do you know this person? And then sure enough, all things checked out. But to me, that was even more important than the references on his resume. Which is kind of funny in itself because I've never called a reference on a resume that gave a bad reference. So it's like, what's the point of that antiquated process? Let's talk content. So I'm going to lead this question a little bit, but I want to hear your opinion. You have to choose one. You cannot say, well, both, because the answer is both on this one. Okay. Do you think it's quality or quantity in content? What do you think is more important? You have to choose. Don't say both. I know you want to say both because it's the right answer, but
quantity.
Quantity? I agree 100%. And so it really stinks because, we've done pieces of content that were just spectacular, and, there was a lot of production that went into those things, and they get almost the same, viewership or impressions and things like that as some of our less good content type of things. What I find is people need to have a quantity of content just to prove that they're there type of thing. And generally speaking, I think that we enter these things thinking that people are going to listen to every single word and hang on every single note that we say type of thing. It's not like that. Most of the time people just kind of listen to a snip here and there, or they look for the answer to whatever they're looking for type of thing, and they just take a 1-minute excerpt out of a 30-minute long piece a lot of times. So I agree with you 100%. And it's very counterintuitive because you would think that if you had this grand quality content or something that it would be the king's loot for it,
But that's a great point, though. Where did the origination of quality of content come from? And for me personally, it came from the advertising agencies.
Sure.
It made them relevant.
Yep.
The whole process of advertising, in terms of the concept, the script, or the production of it, which was very expensive.
Right.
And not everybody could manage a budget that expensive, and so it's separated. But it definitely. Those ad agencies, the traditional ad agencies, whether it's Gray or BBDO, or they have that advantage back then.
Right.
However, the balance, and again going back to the technology, it opened the floodgates for those at the bottom of the revenue spectrum.
Right.
To say, well, I'm just gonna put a phone in video and get out there. But I think the gap between the quality and quantity is, for ad agencies, they then have to understand, should we offer our clients a service, and it's not profitable for them because before you even walk in the door in an ad agency, you got to think maybe it's 50, 100, 150, 200 grand before you even walk in, and that's not executable at the base. We have to, again, I say this, we have to remember, Fortune 1000 companies, that's just 1,000 companies. Now granted, they certainly hoard a lot of the revenue.
Sure.
But people also have to remember there are over 35 million small businesses in the country that prop up the economy. And so they don't have the budgets at the top of the chain.
Right.
So they're going to then adopt and adapt, and they're going to be guerrilla.
Yeah.
And
they're going to find means to interject in between the big boys type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. You know? So rather than spending 150, 200,000 or 300,000 for a commercial,
they'll do 150 pieces of free content, and it'll swallow the giant one whole type of thing. Yeah, I was just having this exact conversation with Christian actually, and we were talking about, you know, if you could only choose one, you say you have a grand let's say you have a content production budget of $100,000 for a year, right? We were talking about it, and we said, well, would you do one just massive, amazing production value video and push it type of thing, or would you come up with several, call it 3 or 4, and push them all like a medium amount, or just a ton, and then push each one just a small amount type of thing? And what we both came up with was we would take the third, probably. And there's a lot of reasons that we said that, but you know, if you put all your eggs in one basket and you push one big thing, there's no guarantee to see how that's going to be received. Whereas, let's say you come up with, I don't know, 30 pieces or something like that. One of those more than likely is gonna resonate and pull a heart chord type of thing. Now, there's a lot more time effort that probably goes into that, but you know, I think that the shareability of that, the what I would call virility of that, the chances of it going viral are much higher than just putting it all in one or even in a couple.
And you can lure, right? You can lure people in with a 30-second, 45-second snippet, and eventually you can then draw them into longer pieces in your website or your YouTube channel that are more narrative focused. But you want to definitely lure them in with, you know, something that one is authentic, it connects, and it resonates, and the topic, you know, resonates with them. And I just heard on a podcast coming here, you know, where how you label your content is also just as important.
For sure.
You speak to your audience the way the audience wants to be spoken to.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of meeting your audience where they're at, and I think it's a huge mistake that a lot of, especially Fortune 1000 companies do, is I think that they're like, we are blank and this is the way we do things, instead of going to the customer and saying, you are the person we want to talk to. You do things this way, so we're going to talk that way. You know. Just for fun, can you think of any particular, this could be a NASCAR, 424, whatever, can you think of any particular piece of content or endeavor, marketing effort, you know, advisability type thing? Can you think of any of these things that have just surprised the heck out of you? Like maybe something that you thought was going to work really well and didn't work at all, or something that you didn't think was going to work at all and worked really well. Can you think of anything like that you can provide an example?
Ooh, and off the bat, I'd like to
put you on the spot.
I mean, what worked?
I can think of one that we did that was fun. I'll tell you mine, and then that'll give you some time to think. We worked with a HVAC company, and we came up with this idea. So I'm sure you've gotten a billion phone calls about your car's extended warranty or whatever. You know, it's just a part of, you know, being alive and breathing in the United States at this point, I think. So we came up with this idea. They were looking for customer re-engagement, and so what we did was they have their whole CRM system set up. They have email marketing, they have text message marketing, things like that. We said, well, you know, what's a good way that we can think about air conditioning maintenance? And so we got to thinking about it, and we said, well, we could do, like, you're supposed to replace your air filter every 3 months type of thing, right? And so we just came up with this idea, and the owner of this company is hilarious anyways, and he's down for whatever. And I said, well, what if we send out an automated text message, and it was just something super silly, and it was like, hey, trying to contact you about your car's extended warranty. Just kidding, replace your air filter, and by the way, we're here, right? And he got so much results from that. Just because it was funny, you know, it was something that whatever. He gets text messages back all the time. It's like, oh, it's really funny, and we did it, you know, thank you, and all that type of stuff. But I think we're very much in, we're transitioning, or we've already transitioned into a marketing culture where entertainment is king also. And so if you can entertain your audience, then your audience is going to stick with you. If you believe in what they believe in, and if you can entertain them, at least in a fun way, and display that, you know, you're real people in the real world type of thing, I think it's a win every time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the challenge is not just within NASCAR in terms of just how do we? It's the approval process.
Get through a lot of red tape.
You have to, in order to put something out there that would be considered against brand,
right?
Very, very challenging. And so, anytime that I think there was an exploration of, okay, how far do we push the boundaries and how far can we produce a certain type of content we think would resonate,
right?
I think it was just more caution on the side of both property and brand, that we could never really explore it.
Speaking of that, what do you think the future holds for that, particularly for the caution of marketing? Do you think that it's going to get, because you have cancel culture, you have a lot of people that say, oh, I don't agree with what you said, we're never going to do business with you again, no matter what it is, if it matters or not. And then on the other hand, you have people that are like, we just want to be entertained, we're not going to stop watching NASCAR or drinking Bud Light, we're gonna. I mean, that's an example, we just want to be entertained and we want your values to align with ours, type of thing. Do you think that companies are going to get more cautious, or do you think they're going to get less cautious?
I think they're going to be less cautious.
You do?
I do. I think there's going to be a period where, it's going to run its course, and there are going to be other areas that are going to kind of pick up. But I think brands, consumers, and the brands are both going to end up wanting what they want,
right?
And they want to be connected back again. And so the reality and that authenticity and that honesty is going to start, being the driving force towards it. Because at the end of the day, we want to be just authentic with who we are in terms of relationships. We don't want, as Americans, we want to be able to have that freedom of speech. We want to be able to have civility in the dialogue. And I think that's going to be a really critical piece. But I do think caution is going to be less of a filter.
I think you're right. Forward. And I've been thinking about this a lot lately. Some of the campaigns we've run lately have been what I would call like on the line, which is to say, like, does this match with brand fundamentals type of thing? They tend to do better when they're on the line, by the way, versus when they're just straight, vanilla nothingness, But this is what I personally think is going to happen. I think that the Fortune 1000 companies, I think they're going to get more cautious. And I think that as a consequence of that, small businesses are going to be able to interject themselves in that. And I think the Fortune 1000 company is going to lose market share with that. And then they're going to look at a lot of the small businesses that are putting out crazy videos and, not even necessarily things that are bad. It's just things that are explorative, if you will, adventurous. And I think the Fortune 1000 companies are going to start pushing heavy in that direction.
Yeah, I think you're right, because the stakeholders on the public side,
right,
are the ones driving the the guardrails.
Sure.
And so they're not going to be moving. They don't want to lose money on any of their investments.
Right.
And
if that needle starts to drop,
that's right.
You need to pick it up.
Yeah. And I think on the other side, you have the small businesses that have the liberty to gain market share in these areas. And again, on a larger scale, let's just introduce that, which is you've got Bud Light, and then you have Modelo,
right,
that just now has taken in the number one spot, so
right,
to speak, in a short amount of time.
Yep.
And so both brands one has made a decision where loss of market share, and so how they're going to rebound. But then Modelo has come in to step in that gap, and I think and you look at how much they've increased their sales to be at number one,
right,
versus where they were a year ago or 2 years ago. And I think the small business side, that should be an indication, because if you look at the content of Modelo, it's to that spirit,
right,
of individual, of accomplishment, of relationships, and there's so much more behind it. But
sure,
that's where we're going to get back to.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. It's really interesting. I think that marketing mechanics shift based on culture. I think that if our country was at war or something right now, the messaging would be completely different, and the messaging style, because the overall cultural attitude is different from there. But Yeah, the I've had so many people ask me about the Bud Light thing particularly, and it's just really interesting. I'm very interested to see where that goes. But I mean, I remember. So, how familiar with Bud Light marketing stuff are you? By the way, you just kind of would notice it if you talked about it, type of thing.
Yeah, not much. Honestly, just no.
Yeah,
not too much.
Their peak of market share was when they had those Real Men of Genius commercials, and it was just guys being guys doing dumb stuff. But that gets back to like authentic messaging that we were talking about, right? Those are the guys that drink Bud Light. I mean, that's just how it goes, you know? So it's really fascinating to think about those things. So we got a little bit of time left. I want to talk to you a little bit about entrepreneurship. So you decide to go into business for yourself. Most specifically, you know, a lot of our listeners are young up-and-coming entrepreneurs that are looking to take that plunge, and you know, they may go from a six-figure job to a I don't get a paycheck anymore type of a thing. What type of advice would you give somebody that's in those shoes, no matter what industry they were operating in?
Well, the first step, I would do is talk to your network.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to your network. Get out there. Speak to them about it. Find the pros and cons from those that have been in entrepreneurship,
sure,
as well. But also, take that with a grain of salt.
Yep.
Because they've been through it, they understand it. They can offer only from their perspective.
Right.
So depending on how and what kind of business you want to launch, whether it's either the spectrum of it, but from consulting to actual products, I think you need to understand what you're getting into.
Yep.
And where the pain points are. And the second step is, where are you getting your funding from?
Mm-hmm.
Is it capital? Is it capital investment required? Are you raising it, or is it going to be friends and family, or is it going to be bootstrap?
Right.
And how quickly do you want to scale?
Mm-hmm.
But the important thing, I think, for the entrepreneur is you have to have a diagnosis of your systems and processes before you get out in the marketplace. Now, don't get paralyzed by analysis, but you need to understand, if you're right now with one client and you scale to 10
mm-hmm.
in a short amount of time, how do you manage those 10?
Right.
In terms of documentation, compliance, in terms of
taking care of them,
yep,
quality service,
servicing, and then producing and executing, and its results.
Mm-hmm.
So right away, if you're okay, I'm going to do it all on paper, you're in trouble.
Yeah. You need to have a system.
You need to have a system. So what is that system and point of entry? Evaluate that, and from the CRM to automated campaigns or automated software services that will help you, that will reduce the amount of touch points.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have time to touch a client 10 times, but you do need to figure out, touch them 3 times and let the 7 be automated.
Yeah.
So my recommendation would be, first filter out through, the network,
mm-hmm.
And then understand the pain points and the
mm-hmm.
points of failure. Before you go in, don't look at the points of success. It's the likelihood of you failing, and number one area is going to be cash flow.
Right.
Cash flow is going to be the one area. So your pipeline, your business development pipeline, how quickly you can close, and the ability to close to generate revenue.
And when you collect money too, there's so many. I've seen so many businesses flounder just because they take payment on net 30. And then, I think you and I both know that net 30 often becomes net 60 just because the way people pay their bills sometimes.
And some corporations, sometimes it's 120.
Right.
And I don't understand that in this day and age.
No, definitely not, because typically speaking, corporations have that there. I love what you said. Very process driven, and I agree with you 100%. How about, just out of curiosity, I want to hear your opinion. How about things like brand fundamentals and company culture and things like that? Do you think that needs to be at least fleshed out starting on day one, or do you think that that's something that can kind of come into play later?
I think it's going to be a mix of both.
Yep.
You have to establish yourself where in the brand game you are
mm-hmm.
Against your competitors.
Sure.
So understanding where your competitors are in the brand space,
mm-hmm.
High, low, low,
mm-hmm.
And then you figure out, okay, where am I, and,
right.
and how do I get there? But at the same time, you cannot restrict yourself, because your brand's going to evolve.
Right.
And typically for small business owners that are, one-man shop to growing to 2 or 3, it's your personality.
Yep.
It's your personality is what encompasses the brand.
Yeah.
And that's what people are drawn to, and so you have to translate that into your brand, and then culturally you have to mirror that along the way, but then you have to start putting guardrails.
Yep.
As you evolve and as you grow.
Yeah, kind of refine what that means.
Yeah.
I love telling people this. When Christian and I got into business 6, almost 7 years ago, there were 2 things that after we kind of figured out the processes for things, which has changed drastically in 6 years, it just does. We talked about business fundamentals, and I had 2 principles that I said I will never waver on these things. Do not ask, because I will not, and I never have, and I never will. I said, so the first thing is I don't want to touch accounting. I don't want to do payroll. It stresses me out. I can't stand it. Like, I will hate you and you will hate me, and nothing will get done. Like, I don't like it. Okay, that's number 1. Never touched it, not a single time. And the second, I said, I have my reasons for this, but and I'll tell you those reasons too. But I said, I want to be paperless. And I said, I know that's something that's really simple, but it's always going to push us to make sure that we're on that edge. And the reason is because I hate printers. If I touch a printer, it will explode. I've broken so many printers, and I hate them, and I hate printing things. And so we've never wavered on those 2 things. It's just two silly things, but it's funny because we started to make decisions based on those things.
Yep.
And even those 2 simple things got our processes in check, at least on certain metrics of our company with that. So
I think, but that's a great point. Like, so going paperless, requires thinking through
how do we do proposals? How do we? Yep.
Everything. How do you sign them? How do you get how do you distribute those proposals within the company once it's signed? Who gets the contract? And then where is it stored? And then how is it then?
How do you communicate with clients? Yep.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Now you think about the number of how many pages you have to print out.
Yeah.
To do that.
Yeah.
I think paperless is where you should be going.
Yeah.
And if you're still looking for triplicates, good on you.
Yeah.
Good on
For
you.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so much. So I believe we're out of time for the day. Man, thank you so much for joining me today. I always close out Business Legends with a provocative question, if you will. So this is my question for you. I figured it out a couple minutes ago, and it's usually where I stall too. So this is my question for you. You have 3 children. Do you want them to be entrepreneurs, and why?
I definitely want them to be entrepreneurs. I think there is so much opportunity, and I think over the last 60 years, I'll go back a little bit to answer that question. So my dad had 1 job. I probably had 15, 20.
Sure.
And they potentially could have more.
Right.
The consistency in terms of loyalty and working for one shop, I don't think is the picture anymore. And so you have to reinvent yourself a number of times. But what I tell my kids is, whatever you do, how are you going to generate revenue for yourself for the next 40 years? And if you're going to work for the man, work for the system, then just know that you're going to be limited, because 15 years in there and you get laid off, and that's all you need, that's all you can do, that's dangerous.
Yep.
And so I'd rather have them have a spirit of entrepreneurship, which is figure out a number of revenue streams, not just one. If you've got a full-time job and it's not your passion, it's still use that to pay the bills, but then funnel your interests elsewhere.
Yeah.
And look, you can still produce revenue streams in multiple ways in this country, and you just need to be sure that you're not tied. I think one of the biggest challenges for people is you got tied to the mortgage. You got to make sure that mortgage is
something you can handle.
That's 30 years.
Right.
And so, again, so I would prefer them to have an entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah.
I had a conversation recently with my daughter, who just graduated from Quinnipiac.
Oh, cool.
In undergrad. Now she's doing her master's, and I was encouraging her to think, about owning her own business, and that's one thing I think she will do, but she'll have to gain experience in the space first of all.
Sure.
But she has that mindset. She goes, I will, but when the time is right.
Yeah.
So absolutely, I definitely want them, on their own.
Yeah. No path to entrepreneurship is the same. I mean, some people start being entrepreneurs when they're 15 years old, and then other people get into it much later in life. But it's interesting because one thing that I've found that's uniform throughout people is that their life experiences have dictated almost their skill set. Just like you. I mean, you started in an ad agency. You did branding initiatives for NASCAR, and now you consult, and a lot of it has to do with branding and things. So it's very interesting. Well, Chris, thank you so much for joining me today.